Good evening, and welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You all have to buy tires from somebody. You might as well buy them from us. Help fund the movement, help support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what this establishment wants to take from you. Go to TireGet.com. Go to TireGet.com and enter promo code FPR2023 for 5% off your final purchase. I am your host, Royce White, and I am here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, for episode 31. And I'm appreciative of all of the new followers, all of the new subscribers and listeners on the video platforms, on the audio platforms, anywhere and everywhere in the world. We're appreciative that you're here and that you're taking the time, spending precious time out of your day and out of your life to engage in this dialogue on this platform and with Free People Radio. If you want or if you would like, you can visit freepeopleradio.com and give you more information. That'll give you more information about where you can access the podcast, all the different places that you can access the podcast, and all the updates in terms of Free People Radio and helping support the movement in that way. In the coming weeks, we will be launching our patron platform. Our patron platforms will be Subscribe Star, Locals, and Donor Box. And we will also be launching a store as well where you can get your merch and may I say, a lot of people may be waiting for the Spit on the Floor T-shirts. We've gotten a lot of requests about that. So you'll have some show-specific merchandise from my podcast, Professor Penn's podcast, that now will air at midnight, and you can check that podcast out as soon as we get finished here. The Professor Penn podcast over at his channel, which you can find by scrolling down to the featured channels section on this channel. Today, I said we were going to watch together the Age of Easy Money and the Power of the Fed documentary series from PBS Frontline, but we had a little bit of technical difficulties, and instead of risking not being able to bring you an episode tonight, I wanted to talk about some other current events, and we will resolve that technical difficulty, and we will be able to go over this Power of the Fed Age of Easy Money documentary that came out about 3 weeks ago. But there's so many other current events to talk about. I mean, there's so much going on. It's hard to make heads or tails. The story's all over the place. The stories are all over the place, and the story itself is all over the place. So we're going to just go into some more current events this week. But first, I did want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Aside from visiting freepeopleradio.com and tireget.com and following us on all social media platforms, please remember to like and subscribe to the channel. We know it's a nuisance. We know there are people out there who follow the channel, who watch the content consistently, and maybe just haven't subscribed or hit the like button. It does help us. It does help fight the algorithm. And I talked about the war on freedom on Monday night's episode. We are in a war within the algorithms as well. And we have to understand that our own desire to have the convenience of technology has brought us to the point where we must fight for a stake in the ground of technology. Not that we should give in to technology, not that we should become the controlled opposition within technology, but we must certainly confront that the power of technology, the seduction of technology, the impact of technology, the influence of technology is a byproduct of our own doing. And we have to go in there and fight for our position in the technological landscape the same way we have to fight for our citizenship here in this great nation called America and as free people all around the world. So don't give up, and don't let big tech and Silicon Valley punk us and push us around and push us out of these platforms. We can't allow that. We can't allow that. The same way we can't secede and let these anti-American, anti-God globalists push us into a corner. In many ways, you could argue that that's what's already happened in this country. When we fled for the suburbs, for the crime of the inner cities, or we fled for rural America to get away from the industrialization of the country. When we did that, there was a moment where we could have put our foot down and fought for a piece of what was righteous. And when we failed to do that, now we find ourselves in a situation where we've been, you know, we've been scattered. We've been broken. We've been sent into the caves, the corners, the catacombs of what used to be known as the United States of America. Now is being occupied by a foreign authority. So let's fight. I say that just hit the like button and subscribe. We have more content coming. We have more channels coming. We're not stopping. We have a huge plan for the distribution of content, unless for some unforeseeable reason, which really isn't that unforeseeable anymore, we would get deplatformed or censored. But even then, we have plenty of backup plans in terms of content, radio, BitChute. The list goes on and on and on. I think in the coming weeks, I will be getting my own channel on band.video to mirror everything that we're doing on YouTube and the other platforms. So you can also go to band.video to check out some of the content as well. If you tune in, if you're on Getter, every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and any other time I have an episode, the Great War Room Posse, led by Grace Chong and Mo Bannon and the great Steve Bannon, stream my podcast at 9 p.m. Central. So you can go to Getter to check us out. We're all over the place. I mean, in a good way, and I say that in the best way. And we have bigger plans as well. So we need your support. Hit the like and subscribe button if you can, if you have the time. Please leave comments. We appreciate the comments. We appreciate the feedback. The feedback has been great. The reviews have been great on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and so on and so forth. And my YouTube audience, you all are fantastic. We appreciate you. It's springtime here. It's springtime here in Minnesota. Us Northerners, us Vikings, we live in the tundra for most part of the year. So when the ice starts to thaw and the snow starts to melt and the sun starts to peak and the buds start to bloom, you see a different side of us. You see a different side of us Northerners. And that's not to say that everything it gets better, especially given what we're dealing with today in the country. But the good old vitamin D does seem to help one's mood and one's approach to these things. So on Monday, we went all out. I went all out. I told you it's a war. I told you that there's a war on freedom. I told you many of us will have to make a decision coming very soon about the overall future of this nation. Tonight, I want to go over a few current events, but I want to give us some optimism because, I see these issues as being deeply complex insofar as the people who are perpetrating these deceitful, manipulative, misinformation efforts are doing a good job to weave a lot of corruption together. But all in all, the answer is not as complex as many of us would like to believe. And in fact, I would say many of us try to try to make the answers overly complex to give ourselves an excuse or an out not to do the necessary work. In fact, I know that to be the case. And there's just little things that pop on. Like, for example, we had another tragic school shooting, and these mass shootings and this crime, this violence that breaks out amongst people is happening all over the world. But it's unique here in America. And so, the other day on Twitter, I said that there are a number of things that we could do to address school shootings that have nothing to do with gun laws. We could have more security. We could have better entry and exit protocols. We could have blast doors. We could put blast doors on classrooms. We could make blast-proof gymnasiums or put blast doors on gymnasiums. We could obviously have more police officers at the schools as well. Now, that particular one I don't necessarily like the prospect of because increasing the police state in any way, I am categorically opposed to, but in the case of our children, I think that it may be a necessary stopgap while we address this issue. But we also could stop publishing the names of the shooters, and there are a number of other things that we could do. I said that we should maybe suspend all outdoor recess. And I just can tell that the mind of your average American citizen is so warped. Like the critical thinking is so deadened inside by the responses, by the conversation, by the dialogue that takes place in the public square. Now, some people would say, hey, a lot of these comments, a lot of these replies, a lot of the people in this online in the public square are bots. They're not even real people. And I think there's some of that. A lot of that is true. But there are certainly some real people out there. And I know that because I get direct messages from people now. If any AI or big tech players go out of their way to direct message people to try and perpetrate a real person, we live in a scarier time than I would have previously imagined. But I had one person respond to my suggestion about the school shootings and addressing the school shootings and say, kids need recess. Kids need outdoor recess. Guys, we got to get serious about what's going on here. We have to get serious about the proposition in front of us. We have to get serious about the premium on life. We have to get serious about what's at stake. Outdoor recess is a champagne luxury. It really is. And it's a false luxury given what we're dealing with. I mean, who in their right mind would say that outdoor recess is a necessity of such a high order that we would risk the overall safety of our children? And then the person responded and said to me, well, all the school shootings happen inside the school. So what would keeping the kids from going outdoors do? Well, what do you think would happen once we put more security and better protocols with regards to the entry and exit of the school? Once it became nearly impossible for shooters to get into school, then obviously a person who is psychotic and sick and wanted to do something devious and violent would attack people where they're vulnerable next. And that would obviously be at recess. In some schools, you have 3-4 different recesses. I mean, it's just recess has become this integral part of learning. Meanwhile, the philosophy and the critical thinking and all of the things that schools should be about have become an afterthought. You know, it's playtime. It's always playtime at schools. And our parents around the country, we've bought into it. And I have 2 children. And on 2 different occasions, I have tried, whether my child had been sick or whether my child had some type of injury from another sport. We have tried to call the school and say, hey, let my child sit out of outdoor recess today. And the school actually told us no, that we as parents could not choose to have our child not go outdoors for recess. Well, what are we doing? Now, don't get me wrong. That's not a sign of the overall status of the American public. That has to do with the school system that we've let get way out of hand, and that system is already deeply, deeply broken. And that was evident long before the emergence of transgenderism and gender theory and all the things they're teaching now. Our school system's been broken for a while, but none of what the school would say or do would shock me. But what we to say in response, what our sentiment is about these things really does shock me. The gun laws. I mean, look. So many times, so often, we present our ideas in opposition of the other side. It's dangerous. Have some courage. Have some courage. I believe in you all. I believe in this country. I believe in its people. I believe in the spirit of our people. I believe in the foundational ideas that have led to one of the most unique nations in human history. Have some confidence in your own ability to critically think. Don't feel the need to build your worldview or your position on things in juxtaposition to the left or the liberals or whoever else whoever else is out there. Be original. Be original in your thought. People ask me all the time, what's the solution? Start to think for yourself. And starting to think for yourself isn't just pulling away from the matrix. It isn't just taking the red pill. It isn't just seeing beyond the mainstream media the liberal mainstream media industrial complex. Thinking for yourself is daring to have an original thought, daring to have an original idea, even different from the people who may agree with you on mainstream political divides. And an original thought is right here, right now, in my opinion, for me is what's the huge necessity for recess when we're seeing children become the victims of school shooters. Now, the opposition will use us saying, take away the recess and go, how ridiculous is that? You would rather take away children's recess than address gun laws? And there is where we must be wise. There is where we must tune in and plug into the current political discourse and see the underpinnings and the undercurrent of what's really being suggested. Yes, I would gladly sacrifice recess for our kids to ensure and uphold the fundamental necessity of the Second Amendment. Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, I would even advocate that we should start to teach children about our Constitution. It's not by accident that all of these school shootings talk about children in this weird, sycophantic perennial vacuum where the children they're not even really people. And it's not by accident that we live in a post-World War II democratic liberal order society that tends to not see children as people, whether it be in the womb, whether it be as young kids, whether it be scholastically or so on and so forth, and even in perpetuity into their adult life. We never really start to see people as people. That's part of the Yuval Noah Harari syndrome of the West and of modern society, where all of life can be reduced down to suffering. Well, if you bastardize a human being and make their life only about suffering, it becomes very easy to justify not treating them as a human being at all, or obscuring what it means to treat a human being as a human being. And that's why Yuval Noah Harari feels completely fine going on the record publicly while being recorded and saying, hey, these useless people are going to need something. And that's something we're going to give them. The only feasible thing we can give them is drugs and video games. They want to treat you like a child. They want to treat you like a non-human child. That is a bastardization of humanity. That is defiling somebody's human dignity to say, hey, you're useless. And where our society is going, you're useless. The best thing we can hope to do for you is to give you drugs and video games, porn. Strange. These are the people we let lead the discourse. And not only that, we're afraid to voice our original ideas based on what they may say. Never base what you should do off of what somebody isn't doing. It's the same thing that could be said for the Uyghur genocide. I hear people all the time, primarily black people, but I hear people all the time, even some Republicans and conservatives say, well, why are we worried about them? They don't care about us. You don't tell the truth based on what somebody else will or won't do, what somebody else does or doesn't do. You tell the truth because it's true, and telling the truth is right. That's it. It's not contingent upon somebody else. It's not a zero-sum game. Telling the truth, bearing witness, being righteous is something that you do of its own accord, of your own accord, for your own spirit. And if in the process, in the spirit of an accumulative good that comes from a bunch of individuals in a widespread area doing good things for their own individual spirit. St. Thomas Aquinas said it best. We don't want law and order. We want peace and order. And peace and order, peace comes when man submits his passions to his reason and his reason to God. Peace comes when man submits his passion to his reason and his reason to God. Then man can start to have order. Then man can start to have peace. And once a man has peace, he can now start to have order with other men. Human beings, same thing. The great St. Thomas Aquinas. Beautiful, beautiful insight. Twofold. One about individual will and the ability to have any resemblance of peace in a community or in a society based on individual actions and based on individual clarity, individual relationship with God, but then also how not to let the law serve as the deity or the standard by which one lives their life. We don't want to have to force people to be good. We don't want to have to force people to be righteous, to be good-spirited. We want to teach people how to be and why to be. And why don't we do that with our children? Why don't we, with all these school shootings, first and foremost, where are all these kids? Why don't we have a complete breakaway school system? Let's just talk about that. All these online conservatives, why don't we just create an online school, a conservative online school, a Christian online school? Let's call it Noah. Whatever it is, I don't know. I'm just throwing ideas out today. But it's on the back of this whole idea about school shootings. Because yes, they're tragic. And yes, children dying is the most tragic thing that could happen in a society. Whether they die of leukemia or whether they get shot in a school. And getting shot in a school is much, much more tragic than dying of leukemia, in my opinion. I agree with that. Absolutely. Anybody who doesn't is a monster. And these cowardly people who do these school shootings, you can't even start to put yourself in their shoes. And I wouldn't even want to put myself in their shoes. There is no sympathy or empathy when you kill a child, which is why I appreciate so much when the great Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears was on Bill Maher and had to call foul on the whole notion of even mentioning dead naming or misgendering or have anything to do or mentioning in any way the etiquette of speaking about one's pronouns or identity in the case of children being shot and killed in their school. That is tragic. But we have to understand as well that the occurrence of school shootings isn't about the guns. Yeah, the guns help achieve or execute sinister plans to wreak havoc and do violence. But that's not the start of it. There are plenty of other ways that people could harm children or harm schools if we didn't have guns. Plenty of other ways. Of course there are. And the automatic refute or rebut of that argument is, well, in all these other countries, school shootings aren't an issue. No doubt. No doubt that there's a clear disparity between America and many other nations when it comes to school shootings. That is a sacrifice we must make. That is a sacrifice we have made on the global stage to be the bastion of freedom. And they'll tell you that freedom isn't contingent upon the Second Amendment. Who would be stupid enough to let an elected government official, as high as the President of the United States, President Joe Biden, who would be stupid enough to let a government official tell you you don't need to worry about the tyranny of the government? Imagine being stupid enough, being weak enough, being gullible enough to let a government official currently in the highest office of government tell you at home you do not need to fear or worry about a tyrannical government. It's hard for me to even comprehend how gullible and weak and stupid you would have to be to believe that. He tells us if you want to fight a tyrannical government, you're going to need F-16s. That's not true. That's not true at all. There's nothing true about that. You don't need F-16s to fight a tyrannical government. You need a Second Amendment, and you need people who are willing to lay their life down when the time comes against tyrannical forces. And that's all you need. And so all of these liberals who talk about the Second Amendment as though it's a myth, but then turn around and talk about democracy as though it's the staple of their political worldview and their political animus, From the outset, we know that there's a lie, a great lie being told. The question is, what's the real? What's the reality? The reality that there is a great responsibility that comes with being a citizen. There is a great responsibility that comes with being an American citizen and being being a vessel of freedom, a representative of freedom. I don't think that American citizens understand that we represent the idea of freedom all around the world. We have to embrace that now. We have to double down and triple down on that now, which means we're going to have to take very seriously the implications of the fight between freedom and tyranny from our own government. And we have to represent freedom the right way. We have to represent freedom in a way that will sustain freedom for our generations to come, for the future of this nation. That's why we call it Free People Radio. That's why we call it the Free People of America. And there are free people all around the world. There's a free people of China. There's a free people of Mexico. There's a free people of Great Britain. There's a free people of Australia and the Congo and Egypt. And you pick a place. There are free people everywhere. There are people who aspire to be free all around this planet, all over this planet. But America has it constitutionalized. And we have to represent that now. And so the answer isn't, well, it's Second Amendment or not. The answer is the Second Amendment is a necessity because the threat of tyranny is always there. Certainly in these times with the government officials that we're talking about, the threat of tyranny is always there. And how do we both deal with what we see happening, the tragedies that occur, and uphold the Second Amendment? How do we do that? Well, the first way we do it is we think about the overall the overall scope of the problem and the outcome of the problem, the result. Children dying is a tragedy. We should try and stop that if we can. Not at the expense of turning our children and our entire nation and its people over to the throes of tyranny. That's not an acceptable outcome. That's not an acceptable solution for people who believe in American citizenship. It's just not. Stop saying it. Stop suggesting it. We're not giving our guns up. That's it. We're not giving our guns up. We're not trading the tragic deaths of young children at their schools for the proposition or prospect of complete and utter tyranny and slavery from a tyrannical government. We're not doing it. You can't guilt us into it. You can't make us believe that we don't care about the children because we see the bigger picture. We see the real threat of being controlled and enslaved by a tyrannical government. Because as tragic as it is for a young person, a young child, an innocent child to be killed in their school by gunfire, as tragic as it must be to be a parent, to lose your child, to get a call and lose your child on a random day in that way. And I pray for all of the parents out there who have been subject to this type of tragedy and trauma and heartbreak. My heart really does go out to them. I couldn't imagine it. I have 4 kids myself. I couldn't imagine it. I want more kids. The prospect of school shootings should not deter us from having more children. That's a satanic play. And that's what these school shooters actually mean to do. They hate themselves, they hate life, and they want to instill fear in people about the prospect of life and ultimately death as well. So my heart goes out to the parents. It really does. But at the moment where we give our guns up, the things that will start to happen, the potential, not even that it's a surety, the potential of things that could happen to many, many more children is much, much more dark. Now, we don't want to accept that here in this country because for some reason we want to believe that when Joe Biden says there's no tyranny you ever have to worry about as an American citizen, that's an afterthought. We're done with that. That's not a reality for us anymore. This Constitution, it was written when we were shooting muskets and farming. That's not the reality anymore. You can trust us. You can trust us. No, you can't. And what happens? What happens when the Second Amendment doesn't stop the government? See, many of you don't understand how hard it actually is for the government to maintain control of a society. This is why after World War II, the media and television and technology and all of these things have ramped up. All they do is really keep you in your home. All these things do really is keep you in your home. They keep you comfortable. They keep you content. They keep you in order. Because it's not submitting your passions to your reason and your reason to God that's keeping many of you in order. No, that's keeping the peace. No, it's the threat of a military. It's the threat of a police state. It's the threat of individual demise. It's the material high. It's the drugs. It's the alcohol. It's the porn. It's your own vanity and ego and pride and narcissistic ambitions that have been perpetuated and grandstanded and put in front of you by a very, very sophisticated message machine. These are the things that are keeping you in order. At the moment when the Second Amendment, the real fear of government, that a people rise up, revolt, or say no to tyranny, at the point where the Second Amendment doesn't hold that off, who's going to protect your children then? Who will protect your children then? Are the police protecting your children now at the schools? I mean, in the grand scheme of things, no, because our federal government hasn't made it a priority to have our police there protecting the schools, which shows you what our priority really is. Our priority is to protect the workers. Our priority is to protect production. Our priority is to protect the post-World War II democratic liberal order that's built on industrialization and ultimately the heresy of the scientific method. That's what our police are there doing now. Why is it that protecting our schools isn't a top police priority? I mean, I know we have, I understand we have a shortage of police officers all around the country. I get it. But we couldn't have one or two more officers at each school? Why? Why? And the Democrats are going to say because it makes the school feel like a prison. Does Joe Biden feel like a prisoner of the police state when he has Secret Service who are armed all around him? Does his kids feel, do his children feel like prisoners because they live at the White House? Now, his kids aren't little toddlers or anything like that, but even if they were, has any president in the history of the United States, have their kids been subject to tyrannical police presence when they live at the White House and the entire complex, the entire building, the entire structure, the entire complex is surrounded by armed guards? Of course not. Don't bastardize children in this way. It's very easy to explain to a child that they have armed security for their safety and for their protection. The question of whether to actually protect them or not is a different question entirely. But just in the premise, do not pretend like we can't explain to children why they need more security. Children understand the idea of safety and security. It's not hard to teach a child to look both ways when they cross the street. This is why all of these schools have other school children be the traffic safe zone monitors. What do they call them? Monitors, helpers, whatever it is. You know, they're traffic helpers, traffic volunteers from within the school. They often have the older kids go out there with the vests and the flags, and they do traffic, traffic, whatever they call it. You know what I mean? They help with the traffic. They help the kids walk across the street to get on their way, walking home to school, or to get to the bus, or to come from the bus, or so on and so forth. They help with the traffic zones of the moms and the dads pulling in to pick up the kids and leaving. They help direct the traffic. And so we put children in charge of children all the time in small ways. And we're going to say that children don't. And the little kids understand. They understand when they see a sixth grader with the flag and the vest that kid is there to maintain some order. They understand they're there for their safety. It's not hard to explain that to little kids. You have to remind them. You have to watch them because they lose they lose. Their attention span is shorter than adults, but it's not a concept they can't grasp. This is a degradation. This is a decay of our young people that reaches all the way to the highest orders of elitism and power in this nation and around the world. The bastardization of our young people and their minds and making them weak, making them, imagine how far we've come from a more primal society. I made the point the other day or a couple weeks back about living in Africa and having to make the long walk in Africa as a young kid to the watering hole or to where fresh water is, or you don't drink water. Not to mention the water you may be going to get is potentially, filled with God knows how many poisonous, germs and things that ultimately may kill you in any way. But just the journey out there in nature where wild animals are, predatory wild animals, cheetahs and hyenas and lions and whatever else. They don't have a choice. We voluntarily have decided to make our children weak. And I'm not throwing it on the children. I'm throwing it on us. We make all these excuses as to why certain things would not be good for our children. And ultimately, it bastardizes their intellect. And it's not just around school shootings and why we couldn't explain why more police officers at our schools would be an important use of our resources. No, it's even how we teach them about critical thought. Why don't we teach our young people about philosophy? It's too deep for them. Nothing is too deep. Only a culture who stops believing in God could bastardize a young person's mind or a human mind in this way. This is the Yuval Noah Harari syndrome. This is the fourth industrial revolution syndrome. This is the technocratic syndrome. There'll be all these useless people. Yeah, because you teach them to be useless. You teach them to not be able to think for themselves. You teach them to be, wards of the state. You teach them to be vulnerable, in need of security. You think the police state is going to shrink when the Yuval Noah Hararis are in charge? As much as they want to say Black Lives Matter and defund the police, it's all a scam. The only reason they really want to defund the police and the sheriffs is because in the final analysis, they would love to get guns out of as many people's hands as possible, even our law enforcement. They would love to trade our physical human law enforcement for robots. Take away the gun laws. Now there are no police, there are no sheriffs, there's no righteous law enforcement with a sense of duty and oath to the people. And you bring in robots that you can all program from one sole mainframe. And you can surveil an entire people, an entire nation, an entire population, just like they're doing in China. They're doing it in China now. They're doing it in China right now. And yes, China may not have mass school shootings, but they also don't have freedom. This is the proposition. This is why Monday's episode was the war on freedom. This is the current event that I needed to discuss today. Yes, we have school shootings. It's a price we have to pay for freedom. And it's an unacceptable price. And that's the threshold for citizenship. It's not perfect. It's tough. That's something we have to embrace. Don't opt for these globalists who tell you that citizenship is supposed to be this cakewalk. It's supposed to be hard. You're supposed to have to, present your ideas in the public square against somebody who believes something completely different than you do and see whose ideas end up being better. The cost of citizenship is high. Sometimes it's our children. Sometimes it's our elders. Sometimes it's us. Many times it's us. I mean, if you want to diagnose the overall health of the society, we don't have to talk about the children being killed. We can talk about the random violence that occurs on anybody, any age. Any age. We have a sick society. That's what we have to diagnose. And I feel uniquely positioned to speak on this with some authority because 10 years ago, when I started talking about mental health, nobody on either side of the aisle was talking about mental health. They were only using it as a buzzword whenever something went wrong and they had to posture themselves politically on both sides of the aisle. I hear Democrats, oh, we need background checks. We need mental health background checks. That's a red herring. The mental health background checks is a red herring. And all the Republicans who opt for it too, that's how you can see a neocon. That's how you can see a rhino. When a Republican politician in this country concedes an argument about mental health background checks, there's a rhino. I don't care I don't grab one. I don't care if you like them. I don't care if I know them and they may have said it and I've said I liked. I don't care. We're past all that now. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. If a Republican politician in this country talks around about mental health background checks, they're a rhino. Why? Because they show they have no understanding about the mainstream consensus for mental health disorders or mental illness, which is about as obscure of a classification today as any time in history. I mean, how do they define a mental health disorder? How do we define mental illness? I'll tell you, it's an expanding definition. It's expanding in some places and it's shrinking in others. If you have gender dysphoria now, there's no sign or evidence that has anything to do with your psychological stability or your overall psychological health. Now we're going to say you were born that way. This is a spiritual matter. Gender dysphoria is now a spiritual matter. It's a metaphysical matter. It's extra human. It's extra worldly. It has to do with the zodiacs and the stars and the numbers and astrology and the year of the rat. But all the other mental health diagnostical statistical manuals, all the other classifications in there, they're ironclad, but expanding to say all of you could be a little crazy. All of you could probably fall somewhere on this spectrum of mental health. And I agree. Many of us could. Many of us do land somewhere on a mental health spectrum. Why that needs to be tied to gun laws completely is beyond me. Yeah, there are people who are crazy. There are people who were crazy yesterday that are going to be crazy today. There are people who were crazy yesterday that are going to get a little bit better today. There are people who were crazy yesterday who aren't going to be crazy today. There are people who were totally sane yesterday who are going to go crazy today or go crazy over the next couple of weeks or the next couple of months or the next few years or the next 10 years. Or eventually when they get old enough, they're going to lose their mind completely, like Joe Biden, who openly says, I forget that I'm the president of the United States. Where are we? But he can be in charge of an entire army, but you can't be in charge of one gun. The president of the United States, who often forgets what time of day it is, can be in charge of the most powerful military in the history of human civilization, to our knowledge. But you can't be in charge of one firearm. Everybody's on the spectrum now. Okay, yeah, great. And there are huge, huge issues with mental illness and mental health conditions. And maybe it's what we're eating, or maybe it's what we're showing our kids on television, or maybe it's the proliferation of technology and social media and the iPhones and the smartphones and this sort of this hyper vain culture. Maybe it's vaccine injuries. Who knows? We don't know. We really don't know. Our scientific community is so out of control. We have no, maybe it's a little 5G. I don't know. No, but who knows? There's still huge controversy about 5G and the effects of 5G on the human body or the human mind or the human organism in general. Who knows the difference between the effects on adults versus children? Adult minds, fully developed minds versus underdeveloped minds. We don't know. Maybe it's what we're putting in the water. Maybe it's what we're putting in the crops. Maybe it's just what we're teaching in the schools. Maybe it's the lack of critical thought that seeds the way for hydras of mental instability and psychosis and neurosis to nestle their way into the human mind and eventually fracture and break the mind. We don't know. None of that justifies that the answer should be we should lay down and allow the circumstance for tyrannical government here in this country. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely and utterly ridiculous. Nay. No. We need to start to address the cultural sickness here in this nation. Absolutely. And we're going to need some courageous and creative and innovative minds to start to identify and diagnose the level of cultural decay, community, individual, cultural decay, and then forward some ideas to actually change it. I got a good place to start. Those 10 commandments are a great place to start. The Holy Bible is a great place to start. It's a great place to start. I don't know if it's the last stop. For me, it's the last stop as a Christian. I don't know about any of you out there. Can't say. Don't really care. I know it's a great starting point. I know any of your Yuval Noah Harari Sapien books are not going to be the starting point. That we are all beings of extreme and utter suffering, and suffering must be addressed, and we must address it by giving you drugs and video games. I know that's not a great start. I know to drug up the people is not a great start. In what world are drugs not going to lead to more psychological instability? I mean, in what human studies have shown that drugs will give us less mental health issues? Well, all of the mental health issues, I think it's like 70 to 80% of mental health conditions are comorbid with drug and alcohol use. Either drug and alcohol use as a symptom to cope with mental health issues, or the mental health issues were brought on by long-term use of drugs and alcohol, or a combination of the two. What are we talking about here? What are we even talking about? We're going to start to drug people? And that's going to solve the cultural decay? Something has gone wrong with our society. Something has gone wrong with our culture. What's gone wrong is we have lost our sacred honor. And in losing our sacred honor, in going and opting for ourselves on a perpetual basis, we have not paid attention to the lost souls and the lost minds that needed us to minister to them, that needed a mentor, that needed leadership. Lost minds. And I'm not talking about the kid who decides to walk into a school and shoot a school up. I'm talking about their parent. Their parent who got lost, who couldn't keep a track or keep an eye on their child. This is the sequential decay of culture. This is what we're dealing with, and everybody wants to give you some short-term answer. Everybody wants to give you some short-term answer. There are no easy answers. All the easy answers are behind us. All the easy answers are behind us now. There's no easy answer. The answer to the school shooting is that people are going to lose their shit in a society that's radical materialist and vain and wayward and culturally decayed. People are going to lose their fucking minds. Of course they are. Of course they are, and we all know it. And for the most part, all the court, all law enforcement, all our elected officials, all of these institutions have been put there to do is to contain it. And they're in league with the schools, and the schools are in league with the corporations, or vice versa, or intermixed, or whatever case. All of these institutions have served to perpetuate the radical materialism of a post-industrial World War II democratic liberal order. That's why school shootings happen. People have no honor. They have no honor. They have no real philosophical currency. They have no philosophical depth. They haven't been taught how to think on top of whatever other chemicals and things that we put in their mind. On top of all of the abuse and things that they may be dealing with at home from their parents or whatever the case may be, we'll never know. We'll never know. All we hear after the words from these parents is, I can't believe that my kid did this. Yeah, okay. Okay. How many of these parents are probably molesting or abusing their kid? We don't know. We don't know. And I'm not saying that every school shooter is abused at home. I'm sure there are plenty of school shooters that had perfectly fine parents and just lost it. It's easy to lose it in our society today. That's what we have to deal with. That's what we have to address. How easy is it to lose your fucking mind in society today? Very, very easy. Super easy. Many of us today are walking around with broken minds that are functional broken minds. That's the reality. That's the reality. When you look at your life and you look at what you'll believe, you look at what you participate in, it's an absurdity. It's an absurdity from top to bottom. I can't even believe this country's gotten to this place. It's so absurd. Why? Nobody talks like they did when we wrote the Constitution. Nobody even dares to talk like that. Nobody even dares to write like that. Nobody takes their citizenship that serious. That's one of the fundamental pluses of being a citizen of a nation. Being a citizen of a nation brings the physical world, the duty, responsibility, expectation of the human being into a physical context. Same as the church. The church is another thing, another institution that does that, which makes the Bible profound yet again. Upon this rock, I will build my church. Upon this rock, the testament of faith. But the testament of faith being brought into a physical context, not some abstract, hyper-spiritual, metaphysical, intellectualized way, into a physical context. You are a member of this community, and in this community, the expectation of your behavior and your etiquette and your morals and your values and your ethics are as such. We've been on a slow decline from that ever since the Constitution was written. And that's not an indictment of the Constitution. That's a failure of man to live up to the ideals that were put down on paper by some very brilliant individuals. And now you call for solutions. Like Yuval Noah Harari is smarter than Thomas Jefferson. Like Yuval Noah Harari is smarter than George Washington. Like Yuval Noah Harari is smarter than Benjamin Franklin, or the list goes on. They're just repurposing what was already written and adding their own little sick, twisted, technocratic, spin on the deal. And you're all so willing. You know, the proximity, the proximity, the distance from our founding fathers, I think makes us look at them in some unappreciative manner. It's not to say that they were without flaw. We all know nobody's without flaw, but we're certainly not without flaw. He who is without sin cast the first stone. You're all willing to reap the benefits of slave labor. I can't tell you how many black people I hear reference white men or the founding fathers of the Constitution in a slavery context when you're all willing to reap the benefits of slave labor today. You're all willing to reap the benefits of slave labor today. What's the difference? What's the difference between you and early colonial slavers if you're willing to reap the benefits? We all have debt on the ledger. We all have blood on our hands. This is a reality. This is what we must confront, not virtue signal over one another. I don't even know where this Shure microphone comes from. I'm sure some parts in it come from China. Maybe this arm here comes from China. Maybe the little LED light in the microphone comes from China. I have to own that. I have to own that. It's not to say you, me, us, we. We have to address these things now. This is why the school shootings continue to happen. We haven't addressed these things. It's not the guns. The gun is just the easiest way to execute the plan. There's all kinds of things you could do to a school to potentially harm children. A gun is yeah, it has its efficiency to it, no doubt. No doubt it does. No doubt it does. So, background checks. What are background checks going to become? If you've ever gotten treated for a mental health condition, you can't own a firearm? Really? That list's going to get pretty big pretty quick. If you've ever been institutionalized, that's the criteria. I mean, where are we going to go with that? This is how the Republican apparatus, the mainstream Republicans, man, if they're not in on it, they sure do a great job to make it seem like they're in on it. Better background checks. We all agree. No, we don't agree. No, we all don't agree on better background checks, especially when they let the president of the United States, who can barely spell his own name, be in charge of the entire American military and nuclear weapons. He can barely remember his own name, but they don't want you to own a single firearm, a single AR-15. You can't own an AR-15, but the president of the United States can have his finger on the nuclear button and he's completely demented. He has dementia to boot. Meanwhile, they'll write articles in the New York Times and the Washington Journal and Axios and the Guardian and so on and so forth that Donald Trump has severe mental illness. That Donald Trump's mental illness is what we should account for. Not only that, his derangement, his tinfoil hat conspiracy theories are the reason why half of the country, 75 million voters, are also crazy. Pretty soon, by the declaration of the National Security Council on Domestic Terrorism, pretty soon, if you believe in God, if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe in having a country, if you believe in conservatism, if you're a white man, if you're a black man who doesn't say Black trans lives matter, if you're any of these people, you will be deemed mentally unstable. You will be deemed crazy. This is why the show is, please call me crazy, because crazy is a word that's been loosely thrown around at a lot of different groups of people. And crazy is the short stop to mentally unstable and eventually insane, clinically insane, and a threat or danger to society. Then you won't be able to own a gun. If you vote Republican, if you support Donald Trump, if you say make America great again, you're crazy. Can't own a gun. That's what's coming. Duh. I mean, these things aren't even hard. That's not complex for me. I'm sorry. That's a duh, of course. I'm a mental health advocate. We need to work on the overall psychology. As a matter of fact, it's my opinion that the term mental health, as I've said before in the show, is another way to say the human condition, which is at the root of what we need to address in our culture, in our cultural decay. Mental health is another way to say the human condition where mind, body, and spirit converge into the perceivable existence. That's what mental health really is. And all of us need help with that. Many of us need help with that. Perpetual help with that. Used to get it from priests, used to get it from prayer. Can't just get it from psychiatric care alone. Can't just get it from medicine alone. That's why all the psychiatric medicine says that it's short term. Most of it says it's short term. In fact, the psychiatric medicine that's prescribed the most in this country, be it SSRIs or anti-anxiety medication like Xanax, these medications are always prescribed they're always prescribed on a short-term basis. They're not long-term. They're short-term remedies. They're short-term treatments. There's another word for short-term that I'm missing, but they're short-term treatments, all of them. Prozac, Zoloft, you pick one. The SSRIs, the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, those are all short-term treatments. Xanax, all of the benzodiazepines, they're all short-term treatments. They're not long-term. Why? Because there's something else going on. There's something else taking our culture down. There's something else at work in cultures all around the world, today and the past and any time into the future. And I don't care how many of you they put on benzodiazepines or some new form of drug, microdose LSD. Who do you think came up with the micro? This is, and then let's talk about, I'm glad we came to this point. I think you guys understand where I'm going. Let's talk about microdosing LSD for a moment, can we? Can we talk about microdosing? This is a Yuval Noah Harari phenomenon. This is a big tech Silicon Valley radical, liberal, probably anti-God Satanist phenomenon. Let's microdose LSD, okay? I just want to pull this up for you. Project MK Ultra. And we come back to the sine qua non. Project MK Ultra was an illegal human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the United States Central Intelligence Agency, intended to develop procedures and identify drugs that could be used in interrogations to weaken individuals and force confessions through brainwashing and psychological torture. It began in 1953 and was halted in 1973, so they say. MK Ultra used numerous methods to manipulate its subjects' mental states and brain functions, such as the covert administration of high doses of psychoactive drugs, especially LSD, and other chemicals without the subject's consent. Electroshocks, hypnosis, sensory deprivation, isolation, verbal and sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. Let's microdose LSD. Sounds like MK Ultra never stopped. It just went commercial. MK Ultra was preceded by two drug-related experiments, Project Bluebird and Project Artichoke. Oh, you wouldn't know about these things. Understand, and it's all written here. Imagine now, the things that I would say here on this podcast in and of itself won't make it on Wikipedia. If you go look up my name right now, Please Call Me Crazy, the podcast that now has over 500,000 downloads on the audio platform and over 500,000 views there on YouTube. That reality won't even be mentioned on Wikipedia. Why? Because they're in control of the narrative. But in being in control of that narrative, they don't seem to mind to put these things right here in front of you. I mean, that's another bastardization of your intellect. And it's been happening since you were a small kid in a school at a time that didn't necessarily have to worry about school shootings. Now you do. But they're still bastardizing your intellect the same way they did when you were 9 or 10. Or when they pulled the philosophy out of your schools, when they pulled Marcus Aurelius's meditations out of your schools, out of your curriculum. Project Artichoke, also referred to as Operation Artichoke, was a project developed and enacted by the Central Intelligence Agency for the purpose of researching methods of interrogation. It's all interrogation based. It's all based on making sure you're secure, right? This came before MK Ultra. Artichoke and Bluebird was before MK Ultra. Okay? Now, this gets better here. The program, we're going back to operate MK Ultra. MK Ultra was organized through the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence. Oh, scientific intelligence. Our liberal friends, they love scientific intelligence. They love to throw science. They love to throw science out in front as the bludgeon, right? As the battle axe of tyranny and totalitarianism. Science, scientific advancement. And coordinated with the United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. I mean, it's all here, guys. I'm just reading. Please, YouTube, don't take me down. I'm just reading your buddies over there at Wikipedia. This isn't Royce talking. I'm just reading from what you guys have written here, okay? Operation MK Ultra, Project MK Ultra, was organized through the CIA's Office of Scientific Intelligence and coordinated with the United States Army of Biological Warfare Laboratories. United States Army Biological Warfare Laboratories. The program engaged in illegal activities, including the use of United States and Canadian citizens and unwitting test subjects. They're going to test you without your knowledge. Over 7,000 American veterans took part in these experiments non-consensually during the 50s and 70s. During the 50s through the 70s. These people are still alive. Some of these people are probably still alive today. Or they had children. And their children are certainly still alive. Who knows? Many of them sued later, okay? MK Ultra's scope was broad, with activities carried out under the guise of research. At more than 80 institutions aside from the military, including colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, pharmaceutical companies, and otherwise. I'm just reading here. MK Ultra's scope was broad, with activities carried out under the guise of research at more than 80 institutions aside from the military, including colleges, universities, hospitals, prisons, and pharmaceutical companies. The CIA operated using front organizations, although some top officials at these institutions were aware of the CIA's involvement. MK Ultra was first brought to public attention in 1975 by the Church Committee, something we need to reenact. We need another Church Committee of the United States Congress, and Gerald Ford's United States President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States, also known as the Rockefeller Commission. Oh, the Rockefeller. Oh, okay, great. There's how you're going to go and use and take the corrupt to investigate the corrupt and bring you a little small kernel of the truth so that the whole operation can continue on after the whole thing is wrapped up. That's what that is. The Rockefellers were in there to try and, bring some of this to the public because it was probably going to go public because you can't help it. It's very hard to keep up with lies, especially lies that big, especially that corrupt. So now we send the philanthropic Rockefeller Foundation. We send the Rockefellers in there to lead up this commission because now we're going to have to admit to some of this, and we'll rope off that piece that we admit so that the whole thing can continue in a much grander scale. That's how this government works. That's how corruption works. Not an indictment of America or the Constitution. It's an indictment of our politicians, our federal government, our corporations, our academic institutions, and most importantly, it's an indictment of you because you participate. The investigative efforts hampered by CIA Director Richard Helms ordered that all MK Ultra files be. Whoa. Investigative efforts were hampered by CIA Director Richard Helms, who ordered that all MK Ultra files be destroyed in 73. The Church Committee and Rockefeller Commission investigations relied on the sworn testimony of direct participants and on the small number of documents that survived Helms' order. In 1977, a Freedom of Information Act request uncovered a cache of 20,000 documents relating to MK Ultra, which led to Senate hearings. Some surviving information about MK Ultra was declassified in July 2001. 9/11. Let's just do a little bit of background here. I just want to look at what we're really dealing with here. Let's go into the background. According to Stephen Kinzer, the CIA project was a continuation of the work begun in World War II era, Japanese facilities, and Nazi concentration camps. I mean, do I have to go further, guys? Do I have to go any further? I mean, should I just stop the show now? Please, call me crazy. This is what they write. This isn't tinfoil hat. This isn't conspiracy. They're writing this. The CIA project was a continuation of the work begun in World War II era Japanese facilities and Nazi concentration camps on subduing and controlling human minds. Kinzer writes that MK Ultra's use of mescaline on unwitting subjects was a practice that Nazi doctors had begun in the camps at Auschwitz. Kinzer gives evidence of the continuation of a Nazi agenda, citing the CIA's secret recruitment of Nazi torturers and vivisectionists to continue experimenting on thousands of subjects, and Nazis were brought to Fort Detrick, Maryland, to instruct CIA officers on the lethal use of sarin gas. I just want to list another couple of secret projects that this whole deal was a part of. Just so you understand where this whole deal is. Just wait for a moment here, because there are a number of operations that took place in this time period that people were never aware of, right? Never were aware of all of these sort of secret operations that now they want you to say are complete conspiracy theory. I can't talk about conspiracy theories, right? We can't question if there's a deep state. They're here. A front organization. Tons of these MK Ultra programs were carried out through front organizations. A front organization is an entity set up by a controlled or controlled by another organization, such as intelligence agencies. That's the number one thing they list. When we think about front organizations or front companies, we think about drugs and the mafia and organized crime. The number one that they list here is intelligence agencies or organized crime groups or terrorist organizations or secret societies or banned organizations, religious or political groups, advocacy groups, corporations, so on and so forth. Okay. Front organization. The CIA carried out this entire MK Ultra operation through front organizations. Now, who do you think the front organizations are? Colleges, schools, professors, academic laboratories, technology companies, financial institutions. I mean, the list goes on and on. This is moral decay. This is moral hazard. This is why people lose their shit. They know something's going wrong. Human beings were given intuition. I mean, we really the whole anti-God movement is to try and disconnect you from the metaphysical intuition and knowledge that the human being is capable of, and try to explain it away in some hyper scientific way. No, people are losing their shit because the human mind has a gift from God called intuition. And many, many people intuit that there's something deeply, deeply wrong with society and culture today, and their mind can't handle it. Now, when they're in their mind not being able to handle it, they coward, and they resort to trying to alleviate the suffering. You don't understand how the Yuval Noah Harari syndrome is actually what these school shooters exhibit. My suffering is unfair. My suffering is unjust. My suffering is something that I can't contend with or can't confront, and therefore I'd rather end it. But in ending it, I have to seek out revenge or vengeance or a vindictive plot or scheme or violence against random innocent people before I leave this unfair, unjust place. And you think putting people on LSD is going to bring less of that? You think microdosing LSD like they did during Project MK Ultra, you think we're going to have less chaos when everybody's hopped up on LSD? When everybody's hopped up on LSD and in their house 18 hours a day playing video games? No, they don't think that that's going to bring less chaos. They don't think that's going to bring less mental illness or less psychological instability. What they think is by the time you get there, they'll be able to lock you in your home. So you won't be a threat to anybody. All you useless people, like Yuval Noah Harari said, all you useless people will be so drugged up and so psychologically unstable, they'll be able to lock you in your homes because you won't have any sense of citizenship or freedom. You won't even remember what it means to have rights. The thin veil of democracy will have left your mind completely. The thin veil of inalienable rights will have left your memory completely. They'll make sure of it. That's what LSD will do. You won't remember what it means to be a citizen. You won't remember what it means to have rights. You won't remember what it meant to go to school, to be taught, to be able to walk around and enjoy nature, to enjoy the trees, to enjoy the springtime, to enjoy the lakes and the mountains and the riding the bikes and the physical fitness and working out. You won't be able to remember what that's like. And their plan. Now, the problem with their plan is the artificial intelligence isn't even going to work that good. And then watch how desperate they get. And then watch how their real impulse towards tyranny begins to rear its naked head, to rear its ugly head. Then you'll see who they really are. When all of their aristocratic technological pipe dreams don't succeed, then you'll see their shame and their despair, and then you'll see their resent and their regret turn to violence and an animus towards you and your children and your elderly. Gain of function. That seems nonlinear to some people. For some people, they understand what I'm saying. Gain of function. What do we really think it is? What do we really think it's for? Why are we working on making viruses more deadly? Why? Think it's by accident? Think there's no malevolent motive there? Would that be common in human history or in human civilization, that an entire domain of study or endeavor would be lacking in the reemergence of malevolent impulse? Would that make sense? Would that track? One of the highest, most secretive forms of government research at biological labs would be completely lacking in malevolence. Why? Because you have to go to Harvard for 8 years to be in a position to make and call the shots or participate in gain-of-function research. You got to be a Dr. Fauci. And Dr. Fauci's what? He's above the human condition? Where does Dr. Fauci fall on the mental health spectrum? Where does Jen Psaki fall on the mental health spectrum? Where does Kamala Harris with that weird cackling laugh, where does she fall on the mental health spectrum? I know where I fall on the spectrum. Generalized anxiety disorder, diagnosed, 16 years old. Real angst. Real angst about the condition of society and the culture I see around me and the contradiction. Remedied through a faith in God, a belief in Christ. Remedied. Is the anxiety gone? No. Does it cure the anxiety? No. No, it allows me to be able to confront and deal with the suffering in a way that's righteous and honorable. That's what it does. There is no escaping suffering. I love when the venerable Archbishop Fulton Sheen in his Good Friday address says suffering and pain is God's megaphone. Brilliant. Brilliant. It's the only religion. It's the only religious icon. It's the only religious idol, Jesus Christ, whose story is completely based upon his embrace of suffering and God's utilization of suffering, of his suffering, to bring about a better result, a better end result for everyone in the physical, but more importantly in the eternal. And all these people want to throw that idea in the trash, and you think it's by accident. You think it's because of the Crusades. You think it's because of the transatlantic slave trade. You think it's because of the Salem witch trial, the Salem witch hunt, or whatever other Christian shortcoming they want to point to in history. You think that's why they want to throw out a religious icon and narrative that addresses and confronts suffering the way that Christianity does? Really? Are you that daft? Are you that dumb? Are you that gullible? But you'll let an 80-year-old man control the nuclear weapons and he can't remember his first name. I appreciate you guys sitting here listening to me, listening to this. This is therapy for me, actually. Aside from everything else, this is a form of therapy for me. Because sometimes you sit at home in this world that's become so disconnected. I remember, when I was growing up, you used to go to the park. You used to go to the park. You used to be able to go places. We used to go places. There used to be real communities. Technology has bastardized community in the same way the grandiosity of the federal government has. There used to be real communities, and we've been isolated by design and by our own voluntary, participation. But the one thing this does for me is to be able to speak out into the void of American society and culture and see, am I the only one who sees this? Am I the only one who thinks like this? Please call me crazy. Call me crazy. Am I the only one who sees how strange things have gotten? Am I the only one who sees how blatantly hypocritical and contradictory the narrative they want us to swallow is? Pause. I still say pause when things sound like they could be, somewhat homosexual in nature. Hope that's not a hate crime. I'm sure if you're a black Republican or conservative and you say pause, it's hate speech. But if you're a hip hop enthusiastic Democrat, it's culture, right? Pause. But they want us to swallow a narrative that's completely and utterly ridiculous. A 78-year-old man, an 80-year-old man who can barely walk in a straight line is in charge of the most powerful military in human history, and they say that you're too unstable to own a gun. Unbelievable. 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 I'm going to wrap up here, and I just want to, I'm bringing this to you in real time. I didn't write out a script or anything like that. I just want to talk to the people. I just want to discuss these things. Feel free to put comment. We'll come back to this. This isn't going to be the last school shooting. It's not going to be the last tragedy. It's not going to be the last time that violence is used as a calling card to take away your rights. It's not going to be the last time that violence is used as a calling card to undermine the Constitution. It is strange that these recent streak of shootings had involved transgenders. That's weird. It's not unbelievable. It makes perfect sense. But it is strange that, that the school shooting narrative has taken that shift in these last recent occurrences. But back to what I was saying all the way at the beginning, and I said it, on Monday, and I've continued to say it. What are we willing to give up? What are we willing to give up for anything we say we want? The kids have to have outdoor recess? Take your own fucking kid to the park. Stop using the public school system as a goddamn babysitter. Like the goddamn public school system needs to be responsible for giving your kid everything they miss at home, like a vitamin supplementation or some shit. Take your own goddamn kid outside to the park. Take a day during the week where you get off work early from your fucking rat maze job. Your fucking rat maze job. No disrespect to the working class, but much of this has to do with our own sheep-like herdedness. Us being herded like sheep through the American workforce. And I'm all for the American worker. And I hate that your elites sent your work to China and that the unions and everything that took place there was the conduit to China and to this China supremacy. I hate it. I would undo it in a heartbeat. In fact, when I'm in charge of this country, we will undo it. We will undo it. We will restore the American workforce, the American labor force, and the American manufacturing base. But let's be honest. It was our own radical materialism in that instance that allowed for us to be sheep in this whole equation. Your job's not the most fucking important thing in the world. It's an important thing. It's a necessary thing. A good day's work, a hard day's work is a necessary thing. To deny that, to reject that is heresy. We will sweat by the toil of our brow. That's the reality. It was a curse given to us by original sin. If you believe in Christ, you're not going to get out of work. And any substitute for work, any way where you would get out of work is going to come with harsh consequences and penalty because it's not in God's order. It's not in the order. It's not in a holy order. With that being said, take a day off. Go leave from work early one day. How about we have that? How about we have a national referendum on the American work schedule? We want to get paid time leave and all of this other stuff. And I get it. All of that stuff should be worked out. Let's have some real substantive. Let's give some time for the moms and dads of the world who maybe live in a region where it stays dark a little bit later. Let's let them off work a little early. Go get your kid. You go to a local park. Maybe you'll meet one of your neighbors in this radical detached technological world. Maybe you'll meet some of your neighbors again. Maybe their kids can play. Maybe their kids can start to form relationships and bonds in a community where they'll have to grow up and be in charge and responsible for that community. Take your own kid outside. We need outdoor recess to be proctored by the American school system. Why? No, we need our American school system to teach our kids about the Constitution, the importance of the Constitution. That's what I want my school system to teach my kid, which they won't. So I teach my own kid about the Constitution, my own kids about the Constitution. But that's what we should be striving to get our schools to do. We are in a dire situation. And I know you're leftists and even many of your rhinos will try and pretend this isn't a dire situation. They'll go before the Senate, they'll go before the committees and all these things and talk about all the talking and repeat all the talking points that will allow them to position themselves in a political climate that favors reelection, that favors the constituency that they're pitching to. But do they really believe it? Do they even really believe what they're saying out of their own mouth at these hearings? I don't know. Let's go look at how they voted. Go look at their actions. There's the DC that happens in this sort of WWE Hollywood type political theater, and then there's the DC and politics that happens behind closed doors at steakhouses there in DC and all across the country. There's two different DCs. There's two different American political systems. The one that they show you on television and the one where shit actually gets decided. And where shit actually gets decided, people are getting big payoffs to not talk about MK Ultra. To not talk about real reform in our school system that addresses where we are today. Constitution. American manufacturing. Why can't we all learn a trade in school? Why can't we're at school 9 hours a day now, 8-9 hours a day. Why can 1 hour, they say that if you learn something for 1,000 hours or 10,000 hours, that you'll be better at that thing than 95% of the people in the world. Why can't we implement learning trades or crafts, specific crafts, professional trades and things like that, or even just basic skills, some type of skill? I don't know, building or something. Why can't we incorporate that into our curriculum? You don't see it. You don't see that an over-intellectualized scholastic curriculum leads to the dependence on over-credentialized scholastic elites to tell you if your ideas are good enough for you to climb the ladder. You don't see it. I see it plain as day. We need to go back to the basics. This country needs a return to the basics. Let's teach our kids about the Constitution. Let's teach our kids basic skills. Let's not keep having our kids read To Kill a Mockingbird and create this affluent, omnisexual, metropolitan, intellectualized excuse of an education. This is why half the people that are out today are dumb. I'm just going to say it. I get comments all the time, oh, you're so intelligent. I'm not even that intelligent. I mean, really, I'm not. It's just that American intelligence has been watered down so much you don't have to say much of anything to be considered smarter than the rest. It's a shame that I would even be considered an intellectual or a deep philosophical thinker. It's a testament of our own willingness to take a watered down version of intellectual inquiry, intellectual curiosity, intellectual education. Go look at how the founding fathers wrote. Go read how they wrote. It wasn't just poetic for poetic's sake. There was a profundity in it. The current events, we're going to come back and talk about the power of the Fed and the age of easy money. And I got going today on a rant about this issue, but this Second Amendment issue is really one of those root issues that shows all sides of contradiction and illogical thought in the crisis of leadership. It really does. I mean, it really, again, and I'll give you the prime example for you. I'll give you the prime example to leave us today. We are supposed to trust an 80-year-old man who can barely remember how to walk in a straight line. We're supposed to trust him with the entire American military and the biggest arsenal of nuclear weapons in human history, especially when you talk about delivery capacity. We're supposed to trust this man with that capability. But they don't trust you with a single firearm? We got a problem. The problem is we're illogical beyond measure. And part of that problem is that our ability to even be logical has been strategically taken from us, and we accepted it because the high is better than logic. The high is better than critical thought. The high is better than the rigorous intellectual curiosity and inquiry that's needed to uphold the responsibility of freedom and citizenship. We gave it up. We gave it up. We like it. We like the music. We like the drugs. We like the television. We like the living vicariously through sports and entertainment and actors and actresses and false idols and magazines and so on and so forth. We like it. It feels good. It was meant to feel good. This was MK Ultra. Why do you think MK Ultra and these things emerged right around the 50s? Why do you think at the time when many of the time when what many of us would consider to be the time where America was great, there was a secret plot hatched to fundamentally and strategically figure out how to weaponize the human psychology to destroy and decay the culture? You think that's by accident? Sure, the 50s still had some tough times from a race relation standpoint, absolutely. But after the Civil Rights Act was passed, many of the people who were living in the 70s will tell you that racial tension began to cease in the 70s. There was a time of genuine, racial reconciliation. Do you think it's by accident that MK Ultra was a part of the same CIA cohort of operations as COINTELPRO? Do you think the racial division we see in the country today is happenstance? Do you think that it comes from a real difference of culture and genetic sequencing from the Human Genome Project and Darwinist race theory? You really think that? Manufactured. The CIA is knee deep in conspiracy. The CIA is knee deep in social engineering. The CIA is balls deep in your anus. Let's just talk honestly. They're balls deep in you. You don't know which way is up because we surrendered. We have constantly surrendered the responsibility, the duty of American citizenship for materialism and security. And that's the choice we're faced with now. That's what will bring us a different result, a different outcome when it as it pertains to school shootings and any other cultural issue that is out there for us to discuss. Sacred honor, leadership, confront our suffering, acknowledge our sin, repent. Give away some of that security and materialism. Get ready, give it away, and maybe we can take back some of that freedom. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio, and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. The Patriot Economy, the Parallel Economy, the Alternative Economy, whatever name you like. The economy that's not globalist, the anti-globalist economy, it's going to start right here in this country with small businesses and middle markets and individual consumers that make better choices with their dollars and their vote. If you have to buy tires in the next couple of weeks, if you have to buy tires in the next couple of years, whenever you have to buy tires, just go to TireGet.com. TireGet.com, support a tire company that actually puts money towards the movement and supports the movement and isn't going to allow these globalists to tell them who they can be affiliated with, who they can put money behind, what messages and beliefs and values they can stand on. We can't resign from the economy. The economy isn't theirs. Tires aren't theirs. Technology isn't theirs. All of that was afforded by American ingenuity for the most part. All of that was on the sacrifices of soldiers who died in World War II for our freedoms, for our ideals. To let them weaponize those sacrifices, to let them use that sacrifice to bully us and pit us into a corner where we resign from all of the things that those sacrifices gave us is a bastardization of our own freedom and citizenship. We cannot resign. We must walk forward. We must walk forward with courage and sacred honor. And I say that with the sponsorship plug because it's not just a sponsorship plug to pay the bills. We actually need American companies to rise up and fight. all across this country. We need American we need sponsors. We need American companies to find their national pride. Yeah, the movement's going to cost any counter movement's going to cost money. Any rebellion's going to any cause is going to cost money. There's still ways you can participate without giving money as well. But the reality that the cause will be an expensive cause is a reality. It's a reality we must confront. So if you have time, if you have to buy tires, if somebody you know has to buy tires, go to tireget.com. Use FPR 2023 for 5% off your final purchase. We are now available on all video platforms, YouTube, Rumble. We're getting Rumble up as soon as we can. Sometimes we have trouble uploading, and the upload speed times are something we're trying to work out with Rumble, and we'll get there behind the scenes with their people and figure out if there's a way for us to do it in a more efficient manner. But we're on Rumble, we're on YouTube, we're on BitChute, we're backed up on BitChute. We're still looking into Twitch, and I think Odyssey was mentioned by some people. We're trying to do the best we can to bring you the content in every place that you are, and every place you may need to be in the future if we get censored or if YouTube starts to censor anybody who talks about MK Ultra, gain of function. Right now, we are on all audio platforms. The audio platforms have been good not to censor us. As far as we know, we're popping right up, right away. You put in my name and you put in Please Call Me Crazy, not being shadow banned at all on the audio platforms. And that's where we're getting a majority of our downloads, up to around 8,000 to 10,000 downloads per day. And we're increasing quickly. For Friday's Family and Friend episode, we are bringing back the great AJ Barker. I thought it'd be a great way to end the week after Holy Week and Easter Sunday, to bring back my brother, AJ Barker, who is a religion teacher, a Catholic studies teacher, and he and I talked about a number of things, and we crossed a Rubicon of cultural topics. But AJ's somebody who I respect greatly. I love him to death. He's family, and I think he had a great insight. We already recorded this episode, by the way, so that's why I can tell you about it now. But he had a number of great insights in our conversation and dialogue, and I can't wait for you to hear it on Friday. So please join us again Friday night at 9 p.m. Central here on YouTube or on Rumble, or you can listen on the audio platforms at the same time. The podcast will be released on all three platforms at the same time. And enjoy the great AJ Barker. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, episode 31. And as always, the fight continues. Godspeed.